Educational GMAT. Your partner in your GMAT journey.
This discussion that we are having here in terms of what are the city's main sources of revenue, or when the city has revenues, what does it use those revenues for? These are smaller things, but you need to understand these. And in the book, by the way, we have collated everything in the last chapter as we discussed the critical reasoning knowledge database. So I would request you to go through them. Okay. Which one? Okay. All right. Avnish is saying alpha. What do you guys think? Which one? Okay. All right. Now, in one of the earlier questions, what we discussed was what are the sources of revenue, which would be property tax, income tax, and so on. Here, the question is saying that what is the tax used for, right? So the tax that the government, in other words, the government revenues, which is through the taxes, what is it used for? Can someone tell me what is it used for? All right. Okay. Okay. Very nice. Very nice. Very nice. Uh, in fact, tax is used for very nice, very nice. Maintenance of water lines, correct? Maintenance of water lines. Then plus, very nice, plus police, plus employee salaries, correct? Right? Salaries plus social efforts plus infrastructure and so on, right? Okay. Now, suppose that for a city, population is declining. If population is declining, what will decline? The revenue. Clearly, yeah, clearly this will decline, right? Now, if this declines, then do you agree that the total amount that the government has for all these would come down? The total amount, correct? But the government decides that although I have a lesser total amount for all of these, what I would do is I would keep these two as the same. In other words, I would not let these two services deteriorate. Suppose the government takes a call. Now, if this is a call that the government is taking, that I will not let water lines and police to deteriorate, then what will happen? What will decline? The other services will decline. And notice that's exactly what alpha is saying. If in a city with sharply declining population, notice sharply declining population means what? That the tax revenue is lesser. If police protection and water maintenance do not deteriorate, then other services, what were those other services? Infrastructure, social services, and so on, provided by the city will either deteriorate or be eliminated. So this directly follows the discussion that we had. Now let's look at other options. Baker, if a city's tax rates are held stable, neither the population nor the levels of city services provided will tend to decline over the period. Now, this is basically saying that tax rates are the only reason for decline in population. That's not supported in the argument. Now, come to Charlie. If a city's population declines sharply, which obviously would again mean what? That the tax revenues are lesser for the government. Police protection and water line maintenance are the services that deteriorate most immediately. So I would say this is the culprit. Oh, incidentally, I should have also explained this, that police protection and maintenance water lines is given to us as an example only, which pay for such city services as, which means this is just an example of the two services that the city services pay for. Okay, let's come to David. A city that suffers revenue losses because of a sharp decline in population can make up some of the lost tax revenue by raising taxes, provided the city's tax rates are low in relation to those of other cities. Now, this is clearly wrong, first of all, because David does not even establish that tax was the reason why people were leaving. There could have been other reasons. So then fiddling with tax rates is not going to change that. See, if hygiene situation, for example, in a city is very, very bad, then irrespective of what you do with the taxes, it's not going to help. And finally, what does Edward say? A city that is losing residents because tax rates are perceived as too high by those residents can reverse this population trend by bringing its tax rates down to a more moderate level. So what this is saying is that if people leave a city because of tax rates, will come back to that city. Nothing to that effect can be concluded based upon the information provided in the argument. Yes, tax rates are the only reason for people to leave. Yes, yes. Yes. The area to be policed and the number and length of water lines to be maintained, however, do not decrease. Can you repeat, Bharat, what's your doubt here? Yes, 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 absolutely. So area to be policed and number and length of water lines to be maintained. Area to be policed. No, no, no. Okay, so that's the difference. Suppose that a city has, let's say, 50 kilometers square of area. Okay, and let us say right now there are 1,000 policemen who are guarding that 50-kilometer square area. Now, let us say for this particular city, the population starts declining. Okay. Now, what the argument is saying is that even when the population declines, the area would still be the same, right, for the city, correct? So the area would be the same. But then since the population is declining, which means that the tax revenue of the government will come down, correct? So what the government can do is that while this 50 kilometers square of area was governed or observed by 1,000 policemen, because now the government has lesser revenues, it could perhaps take a call that I would only have 800 policemen now for the same area. So in this case, what will happen? In this case, what will happen? Sorry? Absolutely, right? Police protection will decline. The area remains the same, right? But obviously there are fewer policemen. So police protection will decline. Now, Alpha is saying that if the government takes a call that police protection will not decline, which means if there were 1,000 policemen earlier, there will be 1,000 policemen now as well, despite a decrease in the overall population and hence a decrease in the revenues. So that's what Alpha is talking about. Absolutely. Others will decrease then. So I would just repeat the same thing, that tax revenue will decrease, first of all, because the population is decreasing, and the tax revenue itself provides for police plus water plus infrastructure plus social costs and so on. So Alpha is saying, Bharat, that if the government takes a call that these will remain the same, then obviously other services will either decline or be eliminated. This is what Alpha is saying. When we say police does not decline, what I mean from my example was that if there were 1,000 policemen earlier, there would be 1,000 policemen now also, despite the lower tax revenue. No. And that's the thing, because police protection and water maintenance is just given as an example here. So author is not saying that these are the only two services that are provided. So author is not saying that these two services will not decrease. Alpha is saying that these two services the government has taken will not decrease. Area to be policed is not the same as service of policing. Area to be policed is 50 kilometers square earlier, it's 50 kilometers square now also.